Part 1. The morning sun rose over Cascade Valley like it always did. Daeho stood on his porch watching the golden light spread across the fields. 347 people called this place home. They had built it with their own hands over the last 8 years. The small houses lined the valley floor, surrounded by crops that grew tall and green. Children laughed as they ran to school. Farmers headed to their fields. It was peaceful. Daeho was 47 years old and had lived through worse times. He used to be a military engineer back on Earth. He came to this colony planet called Talon 4 to escape war and build something better. His daughter Gia was helping in the agricultural dome. She was 22 and loved working with plants more than anything. She made things grow in soil that shouldn't support life. Haewon ran across the village square toward Daeho. She was breathing hard. Haewon handled all communications for the village. She was 30 years old and rarely showed fear. But today, fear was written all over her face. "We have a problem," she said. "A big one." Daeho followed her to the communication center. The screen showed something that made his blood run cold. Ships, dozens of them. They hung in orbit above the planet like metal birds waiting to strike. The ships belonged to the Raltesh Empire. The Raltesh were not human. They looked like a mix of insects and reptiles with hard shells and multiple eyes. They had been expanding across this part of the galaxy for years. They saw humans as vermin, weak creatures that needed to be removed. "How long have they been there?" Daeho asked. 2 hours, Haewon said. "They haven't contacted us." "They haven't sent any message. They're just charging their weapons." Daeho felt his heart sink. He knew what this meant. The Raltesh didn't give warnings. They didn't negotiate. They simply erased whatever they didn't like. He ran to find Hyunsu, the village doctor. Hyunsu was 52 and the smartest person Daeho knew. He found him in the medical center. "We need to evacuate," Daeho said. "Now." Hyunsu looked at him with wide eyes. "The old mining tunnels? It's our only chance." The mining tunnels ran deep under the valley. They were built by an earlier expedition and then abandoned. Most people had forgotten about them. But Daeho remembered. He had explored them when they first arrived. Subin helped spread the word. She was the village teacher. 35 years old with a voice that carried authority. She ran through the streets, knocking on doors, pulling people from their homes. "Everyone to the tunnels! Now leave everything." Panic spread like fire. Parents grabbed their children. People ran with whatever they could carry. Tae-yang, the security officer, organized groups. He was 28 and had never faced anything like this. His hands shook as he guided people toward the tunnel entrance. Gia found her father in the chaos. "What about Mom?" she asked. Daeho's wife was on the far side of the valley, tending the orchards. "I'll get her," he said. "You help the others into the tunnels." "No," Gia said firmly. "I'll get her. You're needed here." Before he could argue, she was running. Daeho watched her go and felt fear grip his chest. But there was no time. People needed him. The first explosion hit the northern edge of the valley. The sound was like thunder that wouldn't stop. The ground shook. Houses burst into flames. Then another explosion. And another. The Raltesh ships were firing plasma cannons from orbit. They were turning the entire valley into glass. People screamed and ran. Some didn't make it. Daeho saw old Mr. Park get caught in an explosion. The man simply disappeared in a flash of light and heat. Mrs. Lee was running with her baby when the ground opened up beneath her. They fell into a burning crater. Tae-yang pushed the last group of people into the tunnel entrance. "Go, go!" he shouted. Daeho counted heads as people rushed past him into the darkness below. 212, 231, 250. Where was Gia? The world above was ending. Fire rained from the sky. The air filled with smoke and the smell of burning. Buildings collapsed. The fields that Gia loved so much turned black and dead. Then he saw her. Gia was running through the smoke, supporting an older woman. Her mother. They were moving too slowly. An explosion hit the ground 20 meters behind them. The blast wave threw them forward. Daeho ran out to meet them. He grabbed his wife and half-carried, half-dragged her toward the tunnel. Gia stumbled behind them. Her face was burned. Her clothes were smoking. They fell through the tunnel entrance just as another explosion hit. Tae-yang slammed the heavy metal door shut. The sound of destruction became muffled. Daeho lay on the stone floor gasping for breath. His wife was unconscious. Gia was crying. "Is everyone in?" Subin asked. Hyunsu was counting. His face went pale. 258, he said quietly. We lost 89 people. The number hit them like a physical blow. 89 friends, neighbors, children gone in minutes. The bombardment continued for hours. They could feel it through the rock. The entire mountain shook. People huddled together in the darkness, holding each other, crying. Some prayed. Others sat in shocked silence. Daeho held his wife's hand. Hyun-soo was trying to treat her burns, but the injuries were too severe. She opened her eyes once, looked at Daeho, and smiled. Then she was gone, Jia screamed. The sound echoed through the tunnels. When the bombardment finally stopped, the silence was worse than the noise. They were trapped underground. Everything they had built was destroyed. Many people they loved were dead. Daeho stood up slowly. His body hurt. His heart hurt worse. But he was still alive. They were still alive, listen to me, he said. His voice was rough but steady. The Raltesh think we're dead. Let them believe it. We'll survive down here. We'll grow strong. And one day we'll show them what happens when you try to erase humans. Taeyang brought him deeper into the tunnels. You need to see this, he said. In a deep chamber they found something impossible. The walls were covered in strange symbols that glowed with soft blue light. Technology that wasn't human. It wasn't Raltesh either. It was something older. Hyun-soo touched the wall and it came alive. Images filled the air. Blueprints, designs, weapons, information from a civilization that died long ago. They left this for someone to find, Hyun-soo whispered. And we found it. Daeho looked at the technology, then back at his people. They were broken and hurt and scared, but they were alive. Then we learn, he said. We build. We prepare, and we make them pay for every single person they killed. In the darkness of the tunnel, surrounded by the dead civilization's gift, the survivors of Cascade Valley made a silent promise. They would not just survive. They would become something the Raltesh never expected. Something dangerous, something that would haunt the Empire's nightmares. The war had just begun. Part 2. 1 year passed in the darkness. The tunnels became their new home. Hyun-soo spent his days studying the ancient technology they had found. The symbols on the walls taught him things that human science hadn't discovered yet. He learned how to build weapons that used light and gravity as ammunition. He learned how to make armor that bent light around it, making the wearer invisible. The others learned too. Subin, the teacher, became a student again. She memorized every piece of information from the ancient database. Jia stopped crying and started training. She learned to fight. She learned to hate. Hae-won turned the old communication equipment into something new. She could now hack into Raltesh systems and listen to their conversations. Daeho watched his people transform. Farmers became soldiers. Teachers became engineers. Gentle people became hard. He felt guilty about it sometimes. But guilt was a luxury they couldn't afford. The Raltesh had built a mining colony on the surface. They were taking resources from Talon 4, stripping the planet bare. Hae-won intercepted their communications and translated them. The Raltesh commander was named Vexel. He bragged about destroying the human settlement. He called it pest control. It's time, Daeho said one morning. We're ready for the first strike. Taeyang led the mission. He took 20 people with him. They wore the new armor that Hyun-soo had built. The armor made them nearly invisible. They carried weapons that could cut through Raltesh metal like paper. They moved through the tunnels until they reached a mining outpost on the surface. The attack happened at night. The Raltesh never saw them coming. One moment the guards were standing at their posts. The next moment they were dead, silent, efficient. 20 Raltesh workers tried to run. None of them made it. Before they left, Taeyang arranged the bodies in a specific pattern. When viewed from above, they spelled words in the Raltesh language. The words said, "Remember Cascade." Commander Vexel saw the message the next morning. He was confused. All the humans were supposed to be dead. He decided it must be another species attacking them. Maybe a rival faction. He didn't believe humans could do this. The second attack came 2 weeks later. Then a third. Then a fourth. Each time the invisible humans struck and disappeared. Each time they left the same message. Each time they stole Raltesh equipment and brought it back to the tunnels. Hyun-soo took apart the stolen technology and made it better. He combined Raltesh engineering with the ancient designs. The result was weapons that no one in the galaxy had ever seen. Plasma rifles that never overheated. Grenades that created small black holes. Suits that let a person walk on walls. The raids continued for months. Gia proved to be one of the best fighters. She was fast and fearless. She had lost her gentleness, but she had gained something else. Purpose. Every Reltesh she killed was revenge for her mother. HFY became their secret weapon. She didn't fight directly, but her work was just as deadly. She hacked into Reltesh communications and fed them false information. She made them think attacks were coming from the wrong direction. She made their supply ships go to the wrong coordinates. She turned their own technology against them. The Reltesh soldiers started calling the attackers phantoms. They were terrified. Soldiers refused to go on patrol alone. Some deserted their posts. The fear spread like disease. After 6 months of raids, Commander Vexel sent a message to the Reltesh homeworld. He asked for reinforcements. He admitted that something was hunting his forces. He didn't say it was humans. He still couldn't believe that. The Reltesh High Command sent an investigator. Her name was Kreshtal, and she was known for being ruthless. She arrived with 300 elite soldiers. She immediately started hunting for the phantoms. Kreshtal was smart. She analyzed the attack patterns. She studied the bodies. She noticed that the weapons were too advanced for most species in this region. She started to suspect the truth. Bring me the records from the bombardment, she ordered. The records showed that Cascade Valley had been completely destroyed. Nothing could have survived. But Kreshtal noticed something. There were old mining tunnels listed in the geological surveys. Tunnels that went deep underground. Search every tunnel, she commanded. Seal every entrance. I want whatever is hiding down there brought to me. Deho learned about the search from HFY's intercepts. He gathered the survivors in the main chamber. They're coming for us, he said. We need to split up. Smaller groups. More mobile. They can't catch us all if we're spread out. The 258 survivors divided into 10 teams. Each team took supplies and weapons. Each team was assigned different sections of the tunnel network. Some tunnels had to be collapsed to slow the Reltesh search teams. During one collapse, Subin almost lost all her records. She had been documenting everything. Every battle. Every name of the dead. Every small victory. The falling rocks buried her equipment, but Taeyang pulled her out just in time. She clutched her data drives like they were children. This is our story, she said. If we die, someone needs to know what happened here. The tunnel war became desperate. The Reltesh soldiers had scanners and heavy weapons. The humans had knowledge of the terrain and desperation. Sometimes they fought in darkness so complete that both sides were blind. They learned to fight by sound and memory. Gia's team encountered a Reltesh patrol in a narrow passage. The fight was brutal and close. She felt Reltesh blood splatter on her face. She heard them clicking and hissing in pain. When it was over, 5 Reltesh were dead. 2 humans were wounded. They couldn't win by fighting. There were too many Reltesh and too few humans. Deho knew they needed to change the game completely. We're thinking too small, he told the other team leaders. We keep attacking their mining operations. But that's not where we hurt them. We need to think bigger. HFY had an idea. I've been monitoring their communications with the homeworld. Most of their fleet is spread across the frontier. The capital world is defended, but not heavily. They're overconfident. How far is their homeworld? Deho asked. 3 months of travel with their fastest ships, HFY said. The room went quiet. Everyone understood what Deho was thinking. It was insane, impossible. 258 humans couldn't attack the capital of an empire, but then again, 258 humans weren't supposed to survive orbital bombardment either. We need allies, Hyunsu said. We can't do this alone. The Reltesh have enslaved other species, Subin added. Species that hate them as much as we do. Deho nodded slowly. Then we find them. We unite them. We build a fleet, and we hit the Reltesh where they feel safest. Gia smiled for the first time in months. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who had found a reason to keep fighting. When do we start? She asked. Now, Deho said. We start now. In the tunnels beneath a dead valley, a small group of humans began planning the impossible. They would take the war to the heart of the empire that tried to erase them. They would show the galaxy what happened when you underestimated human beings. The phantoms were about to become something much more dangerous. Part 3, finding allies, was harder than fighting. Deho sent Gia and HFY on the first contact mission. They took a stolen Reltesh shuttle and traveled to a planet called Vel. The Velan people lived there. They looked like large mammals with fur and kind eyes. Before the Reltesh came, they had been peaceful. Now they were slaves. Gia and Haywan landed in secret and made contact with the Velen resistance. The Velen leader was named Tor. He was old and scarred. He didn't trust humans at first. Why should we believe you? Tor asked. Humans are weak. The Reltesh destroyed your settlement in hours. Gia showed him the scars on her arms from the bombardment. They tried, she said. We're still here, and we're going to make them pay. With or without you. She showed him videos of the raids. She showed him the weapons Hyunsu had built. She showed him something else too. Hope. We're not asking you to die for us, Haywan explained. We're asking you to fight for yourselves. We'll provide weapons and training. Together we can hurt them. Tor looked at his people. They were thin and tired. Children who should have been playing worked in factories instead. The elderly died from overwork. He made his decision. We'll fight, he said. Tell us what you need. The network grew. The Velen knew other enslaved species. There were the Kel, who lived in water and were forced to mine underwater resources. There were the Drax, small but clever beings who the Reltesh used as technicians. Each species had been hurt by the Empire. Each species wanted revenge. Daeho met with representatives from 7 different species. They gathered in an abandoned space station on the edge of Reltesh territory. It was the first time so many enemies of the Empire had met together. We're all weak alone, Daeho said. But together we're strong. The Reltesh think we're broken. Let's show them we're not. The others agreed. But they had questions. How would they fight? Where would they strike? What was the goal? Hyunsu presented his plan. We build a fleet. We use stolen Reltesh ships and upgrade them with the ancient technology. We train crews from all our species, and we hit their capital. The room exploded in argument. Attack the capital? That was suicide. The defenses would destroy them. It was impossible. Everything we've done was impossible, Gia said quietly. Her voice cut through the noise. We survived bombardment. We fought an empire with 200 people. We built weapons from buried technology. We made them fear us. What's one more impossible thing? Sufin showed them intelligence that Haywan had gathered. Most of their fleet is on the frontier. The capital is defended, but not as heavily as you think. They believe they're safe. That's their weakness. And if we take their capital, Taeyang added, we cut off the head of the empire. The rest will fall. Slowly, the other species began to see it. The plan was crazy, but it might work. More importantly, it gave them something they had lost. A chance. The alliance formed that day. 7 species united against a common enemy. They called themselves the Cascade Alliance, named after the valley where it all began. Building the fleet took 2 years. It was the hardest work any of them had ever done. The humans taught the others how to modify Reltesh ships. The Velen provided raw materials they stole from mines. The Kel used their water-world resources to cool the advanced reactors. The Drax redesigned the control systems to be faster and more efficient. Hidden in asteroid fields and abandoned systems, they built 47 ships. The largest one they named Cascade's Revenge. Daeho would command it personally. Hyunsu never stopped working. He combined human determination with ancient genius and Reltesh engineering. The result was a fleet unlike anything in the galaxy. Their ships were smaller than Reltesh warships, but faster and more deadly. Their weapons could punch through shields that were supposed to be impenetrable. Training the crews was Jia's responsibility. She was only 26 now, but she had the eyes of someone much older. She trained humans alongside Velen, Kel, and Drax. They learned to work together, fight together, trust each other. Not everyone believed it would work. Some of the older survivors from Cascade Valley thought Daeho had gone mad. They had a good life in the tunnels now. Why risk it all on an impossible attack? Because hiding isn't living, Daeho told them. Because our children deserve better than to hide in darkness forever. Because they tried to erase us and we need to show them they failed. Subin continued to document everything. Her records had grown massive. She recorded every ship built, every person trained, every small success and failure. She knew this story was important no matter how it ended. Haywan spent months creating the perfect deception. She needed to draw the Reltesh fleet away from the capital. She created fake signals suggesting a massive human base on a frontier world. She planted evidence in intercepted communications. She made it look real. Commander Vexel took the bait. He was still hunting for the phantoms after 3 years. He was obsessed. When intelligence suggested a major human stronghold, he volunteered to lead the attack personally. Finally, he told his officers, we'll crush these vermin once and for all. He gathered 60% of the Raltesh fleet and headed for the frontier. Investigator Kreshtal was suspicious. Something felt wrong, but she was overruled. The High Command wanted results. The fake base was real enough to fool scanners. Tae Yang had volunteered to command the garrison there. He knew it was a suicide mission. When the Raltesh fleet arrived, he would have to hold them as long as possible. "I'm not afraid," Tae Yang told Daeho before he left. "My death will mean something. It will give you time to end this." Daeho embraced him. "We'll remember you. All of us will remember. Just win," Tae Yang said. "That's all the memorial I need." When the Raltesh fleet jumped to the frontier, the Cascade Alliance fleet launched. 47 ships carrying 2,000 fighters. Humans, Velen, Kel, Drax, and others, all united by one goal. They traveled through hyperspace toward Raltos Prime, the capital of the Raltesh Empire. The journey took 3 weeks. During that time, people prepared in their own ways. Some prayed. Some trained. Some wrote final messages to loved ones who might never read them. Gia sat in her quarters and thought about her mother, about the village, about all the people who had died. She touched the scars on her arms and made a promise. This ends soon, one way or another. Daeho stood on the bridge of Cascade's Revenge and looked at the stars. He thought about the small village that just wanted to farm and live in peace. He thought about how quickly that peace had been destroyed. He thought about what they had become. "Are you ready?" Hyunsu asked him. "No," Daeho said honestly, "but we're going anyway." The fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Raltos system. Ahead of them, the capital world glowed like a jewel. Cities covered its surface. Billions of Raltesh lived there, unaware that war was coming to their doorstep. The defense fleet moved to intercept. Warning signals filled the communication channels. The Raltesh were confused. These ships used Raltesh codes, but something was wrong. "This is Daeho of Cascade Valley," he broadcast on all frequencies. "You tried to erase us. You killed our families. You thought we were too weak to matter. Today you learn what happens when you underestimate humans." Then he gave the order that would change the galaxy forever. "All ships, attack." The Battle of Raltos Prime had begun. Part 4, the space around Raltos Prime, exploded with light and fire. The Raltesh defense fleet had 30 ships. They were large and powerful, built to intimidate and destroy. The Cascade Alliance fleet had 47 ships that were smaller but faster. The first exchange of fire lit up the darkness. Daeho watched from the bridge as plasma bolts crossed the void. 2 Raltesh destroyers fired at Cascade's Revenge. The shields held, but barely. Hyunsu's modifications were being tested in real combat for the first time. "Return fire," Daeho ordered. The upgraded weapons performed better than expected. The ancient technology combined with Raltesh engineering created devastating results. 1 destroyer's shields collapsed. The second shot tore through its hull. The ship broke apart, spilling atmosphere and bodies into space. Across the battlefield, the Alliance ships were proving themselves. A Velen crew destroyed a Raltesh cruiser with precise targeting. A Kel ship used its water cooling systems to fire continuously without overheating. The Drax modified control systems gave them faster reaction times, but they were still outnumbered, and the Raltesh fought desperately. An Alliance transport took a direct hit and exploded. 53 Velen fighters died in an instant. A human frigate lost its engines and drifted helplessly until a Raltesh destroyer finished it off. "We're losing too many ships," Hyunsu said. "We just need to break through to the planet," Daeho replied. "That's all that matters." Haewon was working frantically at her station. "I'm uploading the virus into their defense grid now. If it works, their planetary weapons will go offline." "If?" Daeho asked. "When?" She corrected herself, though her hands were shaking. The virus spread through the Raltesh systems like poison. One by one, the orbital defense platforms went dark. The planetary shield generators stuttered and failed. The Raltesh had become so dependent on their technology that they never imagined it could be turned against them. "Launch the ground assault," Daeho ordered. Gia led the ground force. She had 20 dropships carrying 400 fighters. They screamed through the atmosphere toward the capital city. Anti-aircraft fire lit up the sky, but Haewon's virus had disabled most of it. Only half worked properly. 1 dropship took a hit and spun out of control. It crashed into a city building, killing everyone aboard. Gia watched it happen and forced herself to feel nothing. There would be time for grief later, if they survived. The dropships landed in the government district. Raltesh citizens ran screaming. They had never seen war on their own world before. They thought they were safe here. They were wrong. The Emperor's Guard responded quickly. These were the elite soldiers of the Empire, trained since birth to protect the capital. They wore heavy armor and carried powerful weapons. They had never lost a battle. They met the Alliance forces in the wide plaza in front of the Imperial Palace. The fighting was brutal and close. Plasma bolts filled the air. Bodies fell on both sides. The Raltesh were well-trained and well-equipped. But the Alliance forces were fighting for everything they had lost. Gia fought with cold fury. She moved through the battle like death itself. Every Raltesh that fell was one step closer to justice. A guard nearly killed her with a plasma blade, but a Velen warrior pushed her aside and took the blow instead. He died saving her. Keep moving, she shouted. Push forward. The battle spread through the city streets. Raltesh civilians were caught in the crossfire. Some died. Gia felt sick about it, but she couldn't stop. They had to reach the palace. In orbit, the space battle was reaching its conclusion. The Raltesh defense fleet was destroyed or scattered. Cascade's Revenge and the remaining Alliance ships held orbit over the capital. They could bombard the city if needed. But that wasn't the plan. They weren't here to destroy. They were here to conquer. Deho received reports from the ground. Gia's forces are at the palace gates. Heavy resistance. They need support. Tell her help is coming, Deho said. He turned to his crew. Prepare my shuttle. I'm going down. Hyunsu looked at him in shock. You're the fleet commander. You can't. I'm also the man who started this, Deho said. I need to finish it. The palace was an enormous structure of black stone and metal. It had stood for 500 years, a symbol of Raltesh power. Now it was under siege by the species they had enslaved and brutalized. The Emperor's Guard made their final stand at the throne room doors. 200 of the Empire's finest warriors formed a wall of armor and weapons. Behind them was the Empress Shaltix herself. The Emperor had died years ago and she ruled alone. Gia stood before them covered in blood and burns. Her forces had taken heavy casualties getting this far. Only 200 fighters remained from the 400 who landed. Surrender, she called out. You've lost. Your fleet is gone. Your capital is ours. Surrender and you'll be treated fairly. The guard commander stepped forward. We do not surrender. We are Raltesh. We would rather die. That can be arranged, Gia said coldly. The final battle for the palace was the bloodiest. The guard fought with fanatical devotion. They knew every corner of the building. They used every advantage. But the Alliance forces had something more powerful than training or equipment. They had nothing left to lose. Deho arrived with reinforcements halfway through the fight. He found Gia holding a corridor against 6 guards. He fought beside his daughter, both of them moving as one. They had lost so much together. They would finish this together. The throne room doors finally broke. The last of the Emperor's Guard fell. Gia walked through the smoke and bodies into the heart of Raltesh power. Empress Shaltix sat on her throne, refusing to run. She was old but still intimidating. She had ruled for 30 years with an iron claw. She had ordered the deaths of billions. Now she faced the survivors of one small village. You were supposed to be extinct, she said. Her voice held more curiosity than fear. Gia walked up to the throne, weapon raised. We're humans. We don't extinct easily. What will you do now? The Empress asked. Kill me? Destroy this city? Become what you hate? Deho stepped forward. No. We'll give you something you never gave us. A trial. Justice. You'll face the consequences of your actions. The fleet will return, Shaltix said. Commander Vexel will crush you. Haywan entered the throne room holding a communication device. Commander Vexel is dead. He committed suicide when he learned the capital had fallen. The frontier fleet is surrendering without him. The Empress's confidence crumbled. She suddenly looked very old and very small. Take her into custody, Deho ordered. Taeyang's sacrifice at the frontier base had given them the time they needed. He and 50 volunteers had held off the Raltesh fleet for 3 days before being overwhelmed. Every one of them died. But their deaths had meaning. They had given the Alliance enough time to take the capital. Subin was already documenting everything. She recorded the fallen, the heroes, the moment when everything changed. Her cameras captured the Alliance flag being raised over the Imperial Palace. Gia stood on the palace balcony and looked out over the city. Fires burned in several districts, Bodies littered the streets. Victory had been expensive. 847 humans had died in the battle. Thousands more from the other species. Deho found her there. "Are you okay?" "I don't know," she said honestly. "We won. We actually won. But it doesn't feel like I thought it would." "That's because you're still human," he said. "Still capable of feeling. That's what makes us different from them." Below them, Raltesh citizens watched in shock as their conquered capital became someone else's city. The impossible had happened. The Empire had fallen to the species it tried to erase. The galaxy would never be the same. Part 5. The trials began 3 months after the capital fell. They held them in the Imperial Palace itself. The same throne room where Raltesh emperors had ruled for centuries now became a courtroom. Representatives from every species the Raltesh had conquered came to watch. Some came to testify, others just came to see their oppressors face justice. Empress Shaltix was the first to stand trial. She sat in chains where her throne once stood. The accusations were read aloud. 300 planets enslaved, 12 billion beings killed or worked to death, 47 species nearly exterminated. The genocide of Cascade Valley. Deho testified about that day. He described the morning peace, the sudden bombardment, the screams, watching 89 people die in minutes, his wife's last breath. Every word was recorded by Subin for history. Gia testified about growing up in the tunnels, about learning to kill instead of farm, about losing her childhood to revenge and war. She spoke calmly, but her hands shook. The Velen testified about slavery, the Kel about forced labor underwater until they drowned from exhaustion, the Drax about being used as living computers. Every species had stories. Every story was worse than the last. Shaltix sat silently through it all. She didn't deny anything. When asked if she wanted to speak, she finally stood. "I did what I did for the Empire," she said, "to make us strong, to ensure our survival. I regret nothing." "That's your tragedy," Deho said. "You still don't understand what you did wrong." The verdict was unanimous. Guilty on all charges. But what would the punishment be? Some wanted execution. Others wanted life in prison. The Alliance Council debated for days. In the end, they chose imprisonment. Not because the Empress deserved mercy, but because they wanted to be better than the Empire had been. She would spend the rest of her life in a cell, forced to watch the peace she had tried to prevent. Investigator Kreshtal's trial was next. Unlike the Empress, she showed remorse. She testified about hunting humans in the tunnels, about the orders she had followed without question. "I told myself I was just doing my job," she said. "I didn't think about the people I was hunting. I didn't let myself think." "But you're thinking now?" Gia asked. "Every day," Kreshtal said. "And I'll think about it for the rest of my life." She received life imprisonment as well. The trials continued for months. Dozens of Raltesh officers and officials faced judgment. Some showed remorse. Most didn't. All faced consequences, but the trials were just the beginning. The real work was building something new. The Cascade Accords were signed 1 year after the capital fell. Every species in the Alliance agreed to them. The document established a new government based on equality and cooperation. No more empires. No more slavery. No more genocide. The Raltesh military was dissolved. Their weapons were destroyed or given to the Alliance Defense Force. Their factories were converted to produce civilian goods. It was painful for the Raltesh, but necessary. Deho addressed the galaxy from the palace balcony. Every species watched on screens across 1,000 worlds. "We didn't come here to conquer," he said. "We came to ensure this never happens again. Not to us, not to anyone. We're offering the Raltesh people a choice. Join us in building something better, or spend your lives bitter about what you lost. Choose wisely." Some Raltesh chose cooperation, mostly the young ones who were tired of war. Others chose bitterness and isolation. But slowly, very slowly, things began to change. The technology they had fought with was now shared freely. Hyunsu established an academy on Raltos Prime. It taught the ancient knowledge combined with modern science. Students from every species learned together. The first graduating class included both human and Raltesh engineers. Haywan built a communication network that connected all the Alliance worlds. Information flowed freely. No more secrets. No more isolated species. Everyone could talk to everyone. Subin published her history. She called it Cascade, a testament to survival. It became required reading in schools across the Alliance. Children learned about the small village that refused to die, about the people who chose justice over revenge. 5 years after the trials, the survivors returned to Talon 4. They stood in Cascade Valley for the first time since the bombardment. The land was still scarred. Black glass covered where fields had grown. The air still smelled wrong. "We're going to rebuild it," Deho announced. Exactly as it was. They started with a memorial. The names of 89 dead were carved into a wall of metal that would never rust or fade. Deho's wife's name was first. Gia placed flowers there every morning while the construction continued. The new village rose slowly. They used materials from all the Alliance species. Velenstone, Kel water systems, Drax technology, human determination. It was more than just rebuilding a village. It was a symbol of what they could create together. People came from across the galaxy to help. Former Raltesh soldiers worked alongside Velen farmers. Kel technicians taught human children. The village that once held 347 people grew to 5,000. Not just humans anymore. Everyone was welcome. Gia took over leadership when Deho retired. She was 33 years old and had fought in more battles than most soldiers twice her age. But she chose peace. She turned the valley into a center for agriculture and learning. The scars on her arms reminded her of war. The growing crops reminded her why peace mattered. Yunsu continued his research until he died at age 70. His final project was a library containing all the knowledge of the ancient civilization, the Alliance species, and the lessons learned from the war. "Knowledge is the best weapon against tyranny," he said. But only if it's shared. Subin kept documenting until she couldn't write anymore. Her final entry was written when she was 65. She described a day in Cascade Valley where Raltesh children played with human children, none of them remembering the war. "This," she wrote, "is what we fought for. Not revenge. This." 10 years after the capital fell, Deho stood in Cascade Valley during a festival. Music played. People danced. Food from a dozen worlds was shared freely. Children ran and laughed without fear. A young Raltesh approached him. She couldn't have been more than 15. "Are you really him?" she asked. "The one who led the attack?" "Yes," Deho said. "They teach us about you in school. About what your people survived. About what my people did." She looked down. "I'm sorry. For what they did. For what happened to you." Deho looked at this child who hadn't even been born during the war, who carried guilt for crimes she didn't commit. "You're not responsible for the past," he said gently, "but you are responsible for the future. Make it better than what came before." She nodded and ran off to join her friends. Deho watched her go and felt something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. Gia found him there. "You're thinking about Mom?" "Always," he said, wondering if she'd be proud of what we built. "She'd be proud you chose to build instead of destroy," Gia said. "That's what makes us human. We can survive anything, but more importantly, we can choose to grow something good from the ashes." That night, Deho walked to the memorial. He touched his wife's name carved in metal. "We did it," he whispered. "They tried to erase us. They killed you and so many others. But we're still here, and we turned their capital into the heart of something better. We won not just the war, but the peace too." The valley was quiet except for distant music from the festival. Above, stars filled the sky. Somewhere out there, 1,000 worlds were learning to live together, learning to choose cooperation over conquest, learning the lesson that Cascade Valley had taught the hard way. You could try to erase humans. You could kill their people and burn their homes. You could bury them underground and hunt them in the dark. But you couldn't make them stop being human. And humans, when pushed far enough, would survive anything. They would build weapons from ancient secrets. They would unite enemies into allies. They would cross the galaxy to bring justice. And then after they won, they would choose mercy. They would build schools instead of prisons. They would share instead of hoard. They would remember the dead by creating a future worth living. That was the real power of humanity. Not that they could fight, not that they could survive, but that they could choose after everything to build something better. The village that was supposed to be erased became the symbol of a new age. The survivors who weren't supposed to exist became leaders. The war that seemed impossible to win became a peace worth protecting. Deho walked back toward the lights and music. Tomorrow he would work on expanding the academy. Next week there would be meetings about a new trading agreement. Life continued as it always did, but tonight he allowed himself to simply be grateful. For survival. For justice. For the chance to build instead of destroy. For being human.